The long night is coming, and the dead come with it.
Her ship wasn't the only one being crashed into. As she looked out towards her fleet, Daenerys could see more ships targeting the fleet. They're black as night. Some of the fleet tried to avoid the incoming ships, but it was too late for them as more ships appeared, blockading them. Then the screams began across the fleet. Thousands of screams coming from her army as the attackers flooded them. Torches were gradually lighting across the ships, all showing complete chaos. Daenerys Unsullied and Tyrells were starting to rally, but the surprise had taken a toll. Daenerys heard a commotion on her own ship as Victarion and Tyrion joined her on the deck. Victarion looked furious. "How the fuck did my brother find us?" He yelled it repeatedly as he barked orders on his ship, getting the men to rally as they started to prepare for the incoming attackers on their ship. Victarion had been paranoid of his brother ever since she'd met him when he burnt the horn called Dragonbinder in front of her as a show of loyalty. He'd insisted on sailing with no sconces lit or candles in the cabins. They were to be in complete darkness at all times when sailing at night, and always alert during the day. Shouldn't the dragons have attacked during the day if he were near us? Tyrion asked. Daenerys nodded as she watched the combat. They would have seen them following us. Do dragons recognize banners if they're the same as ours? Victarion asked heatedly as he pointed to the enemy ships that were circling, fires illuminating their sails. They'd been adorned with Targaryen banners as well as Greyjoy. You can shout all you like about them being intelligent, but not that much. He yelled as he threw his dirk into one of the boarding party's throats. The Ironborn dropped to the ground. She didn't hear a scream though. Victarion jumped down and began hacking his way through the Ironborn, with Loras Tyrell cutting through them like they were butter. Some of the Unsullied began to circle around, protecting Tyrion, Missandei Olenna and herself. It was carnage, with only the screams coming from her own forces. "It looks like the tide's turning in our favor," Tyrion said hopefully as he looked to their ship and others surrounding them. The Unsullied Ironborn and Tyrell forces were holding them off and pushing them back. "My forces are much more skilled than Euron's Ironborn." It seemed to be going well for them, until some of the Ironborn among her forces began to turn on each other. It was evident on her own ship as she watched her corsairs start stabbing Unsullied and Tyrells. One had stabbed Victarion in the leg. The Lord Reaper gave a scream as he hacked at the man, impaling him with his sword. The traitor died silently. "Traitors," Daenerys said harshly as the Tyrells and Unsullied started to fight them off too. Unsullied spears were forming their lines as the Tyrells reformed behind them. "More likely spies, your grace," Tyrion pointed out as they watched their guards push back more Ironborn. Whatever Daenerys planned on saying in response to that was the appearance of another ship, crashing right into the prow of her own ship. It was a blood-red ship with a single black sail. The torchlight showed a man and a woman tied to the prow. The ship was large and powerful. Daenerys could feel it as it hit her own flagship, causing the crew to once again shake. Then a swarm of Ironborn flowed onto her ship, slaughtering more and more. They looked like savages. Her men were holding until her guards got filled with arrows from above her cabin. The archers jumped onto the deck, aiming them at her advisors. Daenerys could see all of her soldiers surrendering as they realized their queen was surrounded. The battle had eventually turned to silence. All but an amused laugh. The laughing man walked her ship casually with a smile on his face as his Ironborn brought Victarion with them. Looking at the man, Daenerys could see he was handsome. Dark hair, a black beard, lean, muscled frame, and a piercing right blue eye. The left was covered in a patch. His appearance was pleasing. Though it won't save him, Daenerys got standing proudly as Euron Greyjoy approached her at the wheel. He gave her a devilish smile. "Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen. It's such a pleasure to meet you. A shame though that my brother forced us to do it this way." At mention of his brother, the Ironborn punched Victarion in the gut. He spat at them. "Traitorous wretches," he yelled. Euron laughed, keeping his bright blue eye on her. "They were never yours to begin with, dear brother. You should never trust a silent Ironborn. It isn't in our nature to be quiet." Daenerys gave a heated glare to the Greyjoy. "And in what way did another usurper plan on meeting me?" Euron smiled genuinely. "It was a dark thing. Well, I expected it, with you agreeing to my terms of marriage. I hope to be your dear husband after all. I dream of us taking the 7 kingdoms. You on your throne, and on Dragonback. and me leading your navies. The sea, the land and sky would be ours. Daenerys couldn't help but admire his charm. She smiled in turn. Your brother put it a lot more crudely. And I have to agree with him. This is no way to treat your rightful queen. Euron kept smiling as he looked her up and down. She could see the lust in his eye. No, I suppose it isn't, but my brother left me little choice but to follow the old way with you. Not that I dislike the old way, but I hope to do better than to make a salt wife of you by the iron price. The mother of dragons deserves so much better than that though. Daenerys' smile turned cruel. I am the dragon. You make a fair point. I am the mother of dragons. You threatened them with that horn of yours. A shame your brother burnt it. I won't forget any that dare harm my children. She hesitated for a moment, then gave an almighty shout to the sky with a grin. Dracarys. It was answered with an almighty roar as her dragon swooped down, starting to burn ships as they circled them. Her fleet and armies may have failed her, but her children never would. She looked towards her advisors. They looked nervous as the fires started to consume ships. They burn unlike me. She knew she would just have to wait for the Ironborn on the ship to break, and then her forces would make short work of Euron Greyjoy. Daenerys looked back towards Euron, expecting him on his knees. Instead, he was laughing and grinning as if it were a joke. She scowled at him. You think this is funny, watching your men burn? You should be afraid. I am the mother of dragons. The unburnt. Breaker of chains. Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. The Khaleesi that mounts the world. Euron's laughter calmed as chaos erupted on the other ships as they fought to regain control. Her dragons circling near to make another attack. I'm sorry, my queen. It's just that you and my brother think ill of me. I would never give the real horn. I just wanted to see if Victarion would use it to take you for himself. It would have failed, and you'd have killed him. He grinned and clapped. Daenerys and her advisors turned their heads as a group of Ironborn brought a massive 6-foot horn onto her ship, bringing it to Euron. She noticed it wasn't just squids. She could see the blue lips of warlocks from the Eastmoor traders. It won't work. I am their mother, she said firmly. Euron shook his head and grinned. You are their mother, but I'll be their master. As he said it, the Ironborn slit the throats of the warlocks. Blood dripped onto the horn, flowing onto the Valyrian markings. I only needed them for help in understanding it. But I wanted them to see you one last time. I know they wanted that. Shame only I can speak on the silence. I'm sure they would have had plenty to say to you if I hadn't taken their tongues after they talked. He grabbed Olenna and forcefully brought her to the horn. Daenerys could see Viserion coming closer to try and help his mother. If he burns the ship, I'm likely to drown. I'll wait until it fails, then my men will strike. What are you doing, Squid? Olenna asked angrily as she was placed in front of the horn. Euron grinned at the old Tyrell. I've sailed across all the seas in this world. I've explored everything from west to east. I have set old Valyria itself, where I found this beauty. I have seen more things in this world than you can possibly imagine. And now I know how this works. The spells I found in Old Town helped with that. I am the horn's master. But to blow the horn it requires a life. No point wasting two beautiful women and a dwarf I can put on the prow. He moved towards Olenna, then whispered something in her ear. The woman's resistance evaporated in an instant. She pursed her lips, the blue on the horn. Daenerys watched as the markings burned red and Olenna Tyrell screamed soot and skin burning. The woman dropped dead. Viserion reacted to the noise, landing on the adjacent ship. Her child was looking directly at Euron. Greyjoy clapped his hands and approached her dragon, walking quickly towards him. Daenerys gave a shout to her dragon. Dracarys. Her dragon did nothing. Her other she heard roaring. They were circling back towards her. It is a shame the horn only works on one. But I think one is ample. With the blood magics I know. This great beast will be the largest and most vicious the world has ever seen. A fitting gift for me. You're not my child's master. She spat as Euron mounted her child. Viserion was compliant. Oh, but I am Salt Wife. I am master of the seas and now the sky. The storm god will fear me, and when I am done killing him, I will awake the drowned god. Euron looked at her and smiled. Fly. Viserion started to beat his wings, flying into the air as Drogon and Rhaegal returned. They roared at their brother. Euron grinned. What was it? Dracarys. Viserion breathed fire at her own brothers. Daenerys screamed. Ser Barristan. It had been a long time since Ser Barristan had been in the Stormlands, his homeland. The last time would have been when King Robert visited. And the last time Robert had visited was when he still looked like the demon of the Trident. It had been many years. And once again I am here to serve a different monarch. Barristan sighed at the thought of it as he walked through Storm's End to meet the new prince consort. The garrison had been filled with the Golden Company, and the field surrounding the great castle was surrounded by the Dornish and Reachmen, all ready to serve the so-called son of Rhaegar. Barristan hadn't been there when they had been killed, or when the bodies were presented. It would be joyful if this was truly Rhaegar's son. It'll be nice to know I hadn't completely failed the man, though I doubt my queen will like that all. Barristan thought as he walked with Ellaria and her sand snakes to the Hall of Storm's End. Targaryen banners were adorning every wall he went past. It sent a strong message that it was no longer a Baratheon place. The group walked slowly as they entered the hall, walking through the Dornish and Reach courtiers, making their way towards Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name. Barristan could see him sitting on his throne laughing amicably with a beautiful Dornish woman in a free-flowing dress covered in martell colors. The Princess Arianne. The sand snakes were giving her a wry smirk as they looked at the sight. It was something his queen would not like. She also wouldn't like the fact that her husband clearly had the Targaryen look. It was a hard thing to dispute. Long white hair, the violet eyes and slightly ethereal skin. The boy had dragon blood, and that couldn't be denied. Barristan knew the boy could be a Blackfair. They were Targaryens too, no matter how much the mainline disagreed. But Barristan had killed the last Blackfair. I doubt this is a Blackfair. Barristan and the Sand Snakes kneeled before the Targaryen when the prince noticed their arrival. Aegon gave a warm smile to them standing from his throne. Barristan noted that he had a regal walk as he approached them, Arianne following alongside John Connington. Another he had got was long dead. You are always close to Rhaegar, you would know if this was his son. You may rise, Ser Barristan, and dear cousins, he said with an air of authority. He speaks well. Barristan noted as he took his stance, looking at Aegon. Your Grace. It is an honor to serve you, Barristan said solemnly. I am glad to know me and my future wife have the great Ser Barristan on our side. Your feats as a king's guard are legendary, Aegon said kindly. I was simply doing my duty, Your Grace, Barristan said simply. You did your duty for the usurper too, John Connington added. Aegon waved John off in an almost joking manner, and he left when he knew that House Targaryen was the rightful heir. I'm sure Ser Barristan would have come to myself and my aunt sooner if he had known I lived and where she was. I've heard tales she was on the move in her youth. The courtiers all seemed to be in his palm. They all smiled at his words. He knows how to play the game. Aegon turned his attention back to him, smile filled with charm. Now, Ser Barristan. I received a raven detailing Daenerys' acceptance of a match. Have you brought news of her plans? Barristan nodded. Queen Daenerys has sent her Dothraki and Unsullied to attack the west and keep the River Lords and Knights of the Vale from joining the fray. She intends to meet you at King's Landing, where you'll take the city together. Though I doubt she will wait if she gets there first. Barristan got glumly. Aegon listened thoughtfully, then nodded. A sound plan. Our forces are ready to march for the capital, and will soon. Though maybe if we're lucky I can take the city first as a wedding present for my wife. Barristan heard the cheers of the courtiers. He wants to take it alone himself. My queen will not be happy if he does. That wasn't a good start for the newly betrothed couple. Aegon clasped his hand and escorted him to the head table. I'll have you sit in honor, Lord Commander. I would have you tell me of my wife tonight whilst we celebrate my betrothal. The courtiers gave another cheer as they began to sit at their tables. Barristan sighed internally at the thought of speaking of his queen. There had been many things that Ser Barristan had admired about his queen. She had an intelligence to her which he had seen in her ability to absorb languages. And her willingness to free the slaves in the East had shown a compassion for the common people that he had not heard of since Aegon the Unlikely. Daenerys could inspire loyalty in her army too, something he had seen with her Unsullied. But for all of that, Barristan had seen more than enough to worry him. Having an army of Dothraki in Westeros, an army that was well known for its practices, was not something Barristan approved of. nor was the gradual abandonment for caring about people. Varistan had heard her rants on the freedmen when they stated she acted like a master, something that he had been inclined to agree with. Something he had admired about her had gradually gone over time as her rule in Miran had proven to be tenuous at best. It had ended in his eyes when she had left as soon as possible after the siege of Miran, abandoning the people completely, leaving burnt ruins. Her compassion had been replaced with an unwillingness to adapt and an ignorance to the effects of her actions. It had turned into the same displeased look at the mention of those she called usurper. She has a similar temper to Robert. And no John Arryn or Ned Stark to comment. Varistan smiled outwardly, holding his tongue. She's beautiful, you Grace. No man can deny that. Aegon smiled as he escorted him to his seat. A wonderful thing to hear about my queen. I'm sure the courtiers and the common people will adore her. Varistan nodded as he took his seat. I hope so, to your grace. Aegon grinned. I look forward to my wedding more and more, Sir Varistan. Varistan heard another cheer from the courtiers as Aegon moved to take his place along the seat. Varistan looked down on the table. He could see among the table Cunnington, Lord Tarley, Arian Martell, and other notable figures of the land. Even Varys, the infamous Master of Whispers. But there was one woman that had caught Varistan's eyes, dressed in the outfit of a septa. And a one that the Dornish were looking at curiously in the room. He knew why immediately as she turned slightly. He could see the dark wisps of hair creeping out of her scarf, those great purple eyes, and beautiful smile. Time had not truly changed her. She was as beautiful as she was when he had last seen her. He had first met her and spoke with her when she had joined Aaliyah's ladies. Her presence had made him regret his vows. I'd grown to love you when we spoke over time. How my vows hurt when we did speak. Ashara was a woman he had loved and mourned a long time ago. And she was here. Ashara Dane turned towards him and gave him a small smile. Her eyes could tell that she knew he'd recognized her. Though she kept it quiet. Varistan only smiled dumbly in response. Then something horrible churned in his stomach as he realized the truth of Ashara's babe. This is the king and the North's mother. She doesn't know how much danger she is in. My queen will not like this if she finds out who you are. Varistan took a long drink as the celebration began. His oath started to hurt once more. Tyrion. Daenerys' scream shot through Tyrion's ears as he watched Euron control one of her dragons. It was breathing fire at its own kin. The sight was horrid yet fascinating. The Greyjoy has actually tamed a dragon. It was amazing to see, for all that it might doom him. For all it will take my chances of killing my whore of a sister. The other two dragons roared fire back at their brother as Viserion flew to meet them properly. It would be a hard battle. Drogon was the largest of the dragons, but the size difference wasn't too much. He imagined this would be a hard battle. And the Meisters called this a dance. They're fools. Tyrion thought as he listened to Daenerys scream through the night. Drogon. She screamed into the night. Tyrion doubted the dragon would hear her, but he did, swooping down, leaving Rhaegal to fight Viserion and Euron, lighting the night with flames. Much like their ships were. Not a single person was moving as they all watched the grand fight. There was an almighty shake as Drogon landed on the ship that Viserion had sat on, now sinking. Daenerys ran to him in a mad fury, climbing onto his back and setting him off to fly. The adjacent ship fully sank as the great black dragon returned to the skies. Tyrion heard a single cry from his queen. Dracarys. The great dragon breathed fire like it was the doom at Viserion, trying to aim at Euron Greyjoy. Their claws were meeting each other in the sky, battering each other. Tyrion was transfixed as he stood with Missandei, watching the dragons fight. Then he heard movement on the decks. Victarion was livid as he broke free from the Ironborn, gutting them with their swords. He tried to set the horn alight to stop whatever spell had done this. It didn't even singe. Permanent. Victarion kicked it angrily. Get the fuck off my ships. The Reaper resumed combat, the Tyrells and Unsullied following suit. It had turned to chaos again on the ships as they began to fight amongst the burned ships. Half of the navy's been wiped out in one attack. Tyrion realized as he continued watching the sight above him. The fight in the sky was a violent one, watching dragon claws go underneath each other's scales, ripping at the flesh as they tried to bite each other. From what Tyrion had seen at the siege of Meereen, Drogon had been the most powerful, the most aggressive. But Viserion was acting much more violent than he expected. much more vicious as he tore at Rugal and bit at Drogon. He looked almost bigger. What in the hells did Euron do? Tyrion honestly didn't know the answer to that. He had studied and read more than most. This was impossible to do. To turn an animal like this in almost a matter of moments. Only magics could do that. Another eruption of dragon fire splattered into the night after Viserion tried to bite into Rogul and its wings. Drogon answering it with a burst of flame of his own. Then Viserion swooped down towards the ships and breathed fire on them. Tyrion swore he could hear a faint laughter from Euron. It sounded joyous as Viserion glided over the burning ships. To Tyrion's horror, Daenerys had followed on Drogon, breathing fire in response. Most hit the wreckage of ships. It was going on forever, the first battle of dragons since the dance. With no party truly winning. But she's holding back. That changed when Euron seemed to get cocky, bringing Viserion under Drogon to claw and burn his underbelly. Daenerys swiftly motioned her dragon to move, gliding to her right as Viserion flew upward, Greyjoy on its back. Viserion had hit briefly, if the scream of Drogon was any indicator. Though it wasn't enough. Drogon jammed his fangs right in Viserion's leg. Rogul following on the other. The two dragons started to crash as they tore into the legs. Viserion was screaming violently as it tried to break free. It only screamed louder as Drogon tore off the leg, making it scream more. Drogon clearly wasn't done, turning its attention to the wing, grabbing it as Viserion lost control. Drogon tore viciously at the wing, creating more screams and roars into the night. Rogul had tired of his leg, ripping it off, then flying in the face of Viserion. It breathed fire right into the head where Euron was. Tyrion could see that the fire had briefly hit Drogon as well, who finally let go of the wing. A body dropped off the back of Viserion, hurtling into the water. Viserion still tried to attack the other dragons. Viserion tried to keep itself balanced as it did, but was falling with a broken wing. Drogon tore at its throat in descent. It hurtled down, crashing into the ocean. Tyrion looked in shock, as did everyone else, among the burning ships and dragons in the sky. And a dead dragon sinking to the depths. Only a dragon can kill a dragon. Tyrion hoped as he hobbled to the cabin, hoping to find a drink.